Hey, you're in. You're in. 2020 was quite a year, wasn't it? I learned so many things. I found new words. I learned that there are new ways to style and accessorize yourself. I got a lot of comments about the buffalo plaid. I learned what buffalo plaid was this year, so that was kind of a big deal. I actually grabbed a whole bunch of masks on my way out today, thinking about all the different styles that I have. I have the crumpled medical one. Favorites, yeah. I have the pink one because I live with 3 women, right? Yeah. And my sister lives in Boston. I'm from New England originally, so she came down at Christmas time and brought me a Red Sox one. Okay, there was no booing in the first service, Clark. Oh, okay, all right. Ooh, and ooh, okay, all right, fair enough. So I've learned now. I went to a couple stores this week to look at end of the year deals, and there are just endless mask options now. So who knew that your face was the future of accessorizing a year ago? Now you know. I've learned other things too, like different terms like social distancing. I'd never heard of that before. I'm an extrovert. I learned that introverts have been practicing social distancing for years, however. Who knew? I learned the word Zoom as both a noun and a verb. I'm Zooming with them. What? I didn't know what that was a year ago. We talked about things like antibodies, supply chains, vaccines. We limited handshakes and hugs. We wondered, how much toilet paper is enough toilet paper? I learned that when I wash my hands, I should do it to the whole chorus of Miss Jackson by Outkast, because it's 20 seconds long. So in case you want to know what I'm doing when I'm washing my hands, it's now singing Miss Jackson to make sure that my hands are clean. We learned about things like contact tracing, flattening the curve, doom scrolling. Some of you will doom scroll before this sermon is over. I hope it's better than that, though. Frontline and essential workers, PPE, mail-in ballots, super spreaders, and virtual happy hour. I'd never heard of any of those things before this year, and now the internet has made me an expert. We argued about masks, closing time for restaurants and bars, and whether or not planes and hotels were clean. I learned where Wuhan, China is on the map. If I'm really honest with you, I'll tell you I learned that there was a place called Wuhan, China in 2020. It was a wild year of new things, learning new habits and new behaviors. And frankly, I can unlearn them just as fast as I learned them, and I can't wait to do so. But that said, as strange as 2020 was, and as many things as I didn't like or didn't want it to be that way or hope it's never that way again, I found in thinking about this sermon for today, where I do this the first Sunday of every January. Everyone I've been here, this is my third one now, where we talk about what God has done in the year before at Crossroads. I had no shortage of stories to tell today. In fact, I do 12. I could have gone way past 12. And so for all of the difficulties and the strangeties and the frustrations of 2020, I'm here to tell you today that God was alive and well and active at Crossroads Church. God did incredible things through us. And I'm going to tell at least 12 stories today, and I'll probably sneak in a few extra just because. But God was mighty in this year, and I'm excited to tell you about it. The first, and I'm going to read the story that I read every year on this Sunday from the book of Joshua. The story is on the back end of the wilderness journey of the Israelites. They've been freed from slavery. They've crossed through the Red Sea. They've wandered in the wilderness for 40 years now under the direction of Moses, with just the promise of a promised land, a land flowing with milk and honey where they can raise their family and make their own. And they're finally on the precipice of entering into that land with now a new leader, Joshua, ready to take them in. And as they come up to the final crossing in the Jordan, Joshua gives his leadership an instruction of how they can remember all that God has done for them. The story goes like this. It's in Joshua chapter 4. I'm going to read the first 9 verses. And I invite you, if you would you stand with me as we honor the reading of the word of the Lord today? Joshua chapter 4, verse 1. When the whole nation had finished crossing the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, "Choose 12 men from among the people, one from each tribe, and tell them to take up the 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, from right where the priests are standing, and carry them over with you and put them down in the place where you stay tonight." So Joshua called together the 12 men he had appointed from the Israelites, one from each tribe. And he said to them, "Go over before the ark of the Lord your God into the middle of the Jordan. Each of you is to take up a stone on his shoulder according to the number of the tribes of the Israelites, to serve as a sign among you. In the future, when your children ask you, 'What do these stones mean?' tell them that the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. These stones are to be a memorial to the people of Israel forever." So the Israelites did as Joshua commanded them. They took 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, according to the number of the tribes of the Israelites, as the Lord had told Joshua, and they carried them over with them to their camp, where they put them down. Joshua set up the 12 stones that had been in the middle of the Jordan at the spot where the priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant stood, and they are there to this day. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You may be seated. And so we'll take just a moment. I've got 12 stones over here. I'm going to set them up. And I hope that they're a reminder that through the struggles and difficulties, God has been with us. And God has done incredible things amongst us. The first thing I thought of when I looked back on this year is that we raised about $30,000 for tech improvements in the church. These tech improvements were things we didn't necessarily have on the front of our planning for this year. But suddenly our church became totally online. And we began to realize and track through things that we knew were weaknesses had become immediate needs. And so while we had an online presence, our technology was a step behind of where we needed to be. And so we struggled to have good lighting, clear pictures, clear sound, especially online. We had one camera, which we still have back in the Eagle's Nest here, but we actually added in 2 cameras as well. So if in the past few months, you've been here every Sunday and not watched online, you may have missed that we've added some cameras. Our guy back in the sound booth should be panning out to show all the capacity of what we could do if you're not watching. But if you look back, you can see 2 added cameras, one docked above the TV and the other docked above the middle screen there. And so these give different abilities to capture different things to help us to have a more engaging service. We've also relined from this room all the way back to our tech room. If you know where our tech room is, it's on this floor all the way back and then around the corner in the far back corner past the fellowship hall. We've had to run wiring that's more modern and strong from this room all the way back there in order to handle the amount of bandwidth that we need to run a clear picture, especially that far. Some of these things were things we talked about improving before we went into shutdown mode this year. But we were always wondering, how are we going to do this when the gym is always busy? There's something going on all the time. When are we just going to close the church for 2 weeks? Well, when it came to us, we thought, now's our moment. We better get this done. And so there's been some really, really strong improvement. And just another thing, I look up into the gathering place right now, and there's been families with kids starting to meet there who don't want to be in here with their loud kids, but we're even running closed-circuiting television up there that allows them to watch their kids and engage with this, since nursery isn't open yet. And so it's been a real blessing. But even beyond just getting us through quarantine and people being at home and all this kind of stuff, we also are strategically planning for that to be the front door of our church moving forward. We want you to be able to use it as an evangelism tool, because sometimes it is intimidating to visit a church the first time. But if you can give them a feel for the church by giving them a link to a sermon or a service that you really liked, or ask them to join you online and watch and debrief them later. All of our services are databased on our YouTube page, so you can give your friends a taste of Crossroads before they even come in. And the stronger our technological connection is in that way, the better presentation of our church that we can make to people, hoping that they come to be embodied as part of our congregation moving forward. And so it's a great evangelism tool as well to help you reach out to people, to let them know and to show them that our church is vibrant and it's also safe, and give them a small sense of feeling like they understand how Crossroads works before they take the risk of visiting for the first time. So I'm really excited about all that. Number two, we made a lot of staff transition in this year as well. First and foremost, we hired 2 full-time pastors, Austin Lash and Jake Roberts. Now, you've seen them both on stage during the service. Pastor Austin is our worship pastor, and Jake is our executive pastor. Both of them, you might have noticed, are a little young. I get that, yeah. One of the things I noticed, now I've been the pastor of Crossroads for just short of 3 years. One of the things that I noticed immediately is that in our strategizing to plant churches over the last decade, which is a great strategy, a great thing to do, but one of the things that I noticed coming from outside in is that it had really zapped our congregation of 20-somethings, and understandably so. A lot of the church planters were youth pastors who had gone to plant, and some of their older teens would go with them, of course. It was an opportunity, as I talked to some of those 20-somethings, for them to enter right into leadership in the church and not really have to wait their turn like it seems like you might have to in larger churches. And so we had a lot of people who were 30-something, and we had a strong kids ministry and a strong teen ministry. We had 30s and 40s all the way up, but we were missing 20-somethings. And the more I talked to our leadership here, the more I talked to our friends who we're not in competition with whatsoever, who have planted churches out of our church and used to pastor and staff here, there was kind of a broad agreement that that was one of the costs to Crossroads. And so as I looked at our pastoral staff, we had great representation in the age groups. I'm lead pastor, I'm in my 30s. Our children's pastor and our youth pastor are in their 40s. We had support staff and part-time pastors in their 50s. We had a great range of pastoral leadership, except in the hole we had in our congregation in our 20s. And so it seemed important to me that when we had these opportunities to hire out, that we started shoring up the places that we were weaker on staff. And so it's really exciting to me that we were able to hire a worship minister who is African American, because our church is diverse. It's really exciting to me that we had qualified young folks in their 20s who were ready to take on the mantle of these big tasks that they were given here, but also had been giving their life to learning the task and trade and were up for the task that we asked them to do here. And so it's really been strategic to identify and find them. They fit the mold of what we were looking for. And it gives us a bit more of a diversity on our pastoral staff to have people on stage who look like and act like the age range of folks that we have in our congregation and who we want to have in our congregation. So as Corona ends, I'm really excited to see what God does in having our 20-something pastors connect with 20-something people and create more pipelines into our children's ministry as people in their 20s are starting to have kids and all of this kind of stuff. I'm looking forward to seeing how that happens when community gets back to normal. But the two of them are also just transparently, they're doing a great job week in, week out as well. They're really talented and really bringing some wholeness to trying to be a church for people of all ages, all backgrounds, all ethnicities, all age groups, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's really exciting to have them. But these full-time pastors aren't the only places where God is doing incredible things among pastoral leaders in our church as well. I'm talking a lot, but I'm still on number 2. I mean, there's so much here. We granted and interviewed 3 local licenses at Crossroads this year of people who are taking the first step into receiving a call of God into ministry and starting towards the process of becoming a pastor. 3 people, and I've got another one lined up in 2021 already. We have 4 people who are district licensed ministers. We had 5 people who this month, until it was canceled, were going to interview for their first district license. District license is when you become a reverend. You have to take a lot of classes in order to get to that point. And we have 1 person who's in their final year before ordination. Pastor Nan Jeffries is scheduled to get ordained in the year 2021. It's just really exciting to see that God is calling, equipping, and working to create ministers out of our congregation here at Crossroads. And then also we transitioned 2 ministers out of paid roles. One was Pastor Norm Huffman, who was our executive pastor. He's now the assistant district superintendent in the mid-Atlantic area, which is great, still a part of Crossroads. And then the other is Jeff Tavares, who is a part-time small groups pastor, also still a part of Crossroads. But Jeff was struggling to finish his classes, work a full-time job, work a part-time job, and find opportunities to develop his craft as a preacher. And so something had to give, and so he was not taking his classes because his extra time was into small groups here. And so he transitioned to a role that we call pastor of local benevolence. He oversees that local benevolence fund, helping fund people who are in need out of Crossroads. And he is giving himself to the life of study to finish his studies. He also taught Sunday school this morning. So, he's still involved here. But we've moved 2 people into those positions as well in part-time capacities. One is Nan Jeffries, who is the pastor of congregational care, and then she also works with senior adults. And then also Liz Powers, who's in her first pastoral role, and she took Jeff's job overseeing small groups here. And both of those ladies are doing just an incredible job. And so God is doing a lot of work in raising up ministers out of our congregation for the sake of ministry. The third one is we did a gathering place remodel. And I saw some pictures came up earlier because I mentioned it for just a moment, but once again, we were thinking that room, which was just so central to the where people met and got together and talked. If you've been with us for a while, you might remember we did donuts and coffee and bagels and breakfast. People from the 9 a.m. service would see people from the 11 a.m. service up there. It was just a central hub of gathering here, but the room was becoming dated. It was almost 20 years old, and the colors were still 20 years old, right? It is what it is. And so we've been thinking, how are we going to get to that? When is that room ever not used? How is it that we'll do the work of changing the floors and relaying the carpet? When will we have a 2-week break in order to do that? Oh, you're seeing a theme develop here. Yeah, and so that's one of the things that we really try to do this year is do some of the building and underlaying upgrades that we needed to do in our building and utilize the time that we were given this year to do it. And so these pictures, if you're watching online, if you've not seen upstairs, this is what it's starting to look like up there. We laid new carpet and we laid new floors and we hung our church vision artwork up there. And there's more work to be done in furniture as we budget it further on, but we wanted to use the time to begin to update it to look more like a 2020s color scheme and model. And I think we really did that. I really appreciate how that looks. And I'm so excited to start utilizing that room again for ministry and getting together. The fourth thing is we began a partnership with the Red Cross in 2020. I met a Nazarene minister who works in the Red Cross. And he told me a little bit about the struggle they were having, especially in a pandemic. They couldn't just have open blood drives anymore. They needed to be socially distanced and cleaned and scheduled, and they couldn't get as many people as they had before. And people were dropping off of hosting left and right because they were afraid to host it, and understandably so. But I became convinced that this is a way that we at Crossroads could help people tangibly in the midst of a medical emergency. And so some of you in this room came and gave and donated, but we used this room as like a triage center about 6 or 7 times in 2020 for people to come in and donate blood while there was a scarcity of donations because of the pandemic. And so we met our goals that Red Cross had for us all but one of the times that we had it. And over the year, they wrote me and told me that Crossroads had collected 254 units of blood, which helped 762 individuals receive blood in a year where there was deep and incredible scarcity. And so I just thought that that was such a great thing that Crossroads did, a great way for us to help the community and help others. And as a pastor, I'm telling you, there's been so many times that I've sat in the hospital with people and seen them turn to blood transfusions in order to bring life to people that I love deeply. And so it was so meaningful to see our church be able to offer this to people like us who were in desperate need. It was really great. I also learned this year, I decided that after we'd hosted about 6 or 7 of them, that it was time for me to give blood. I have really deep veins, so it takes a lot of rooting around to get to my veins. So I don't particularly like to give blood because it takes so much effort. But I donated. And then I immediately found out, like 2 days later, they contacted me and said, Mr. Brooks, you are O negative. And if you know anything about blood types, that's universal. And so I'll be giving blood for the rest of my life. Yay! But it is good news, and it is exciting to see ways in which that we're utilizing the building we have and the ability we have to use this space in order to help people. Number 5 is we started using digital platforms in order to develop discipleship strategies in 2020. If you follow us on Facebook, you may have noticed things like Message Monday, where we sit down and recap the sermon from the week before, or Worship Wednesday, where folks from our congregation or from our pastoral staff will speak about a song or a worship song that they've been singing or listening to, just trying to share the ways in which we're engaging with God in our week. You may have also checked out our podcast, where we're interviewing people inside and outside of the church, thinking about the ways in which we can engage the world we live in with the complexities and struggles we're in now. All of these are meant to be discipleship tools when it's harder to get together, and many people aren't willing to join a small group or go into someone's house or come to the church. We're trying to bring discipleship to people utilizing the digital strategies that we have. And as difficult as 2020 was, and it was absolutely difficult, it's moments like filming and releasing these things that I'm reminded that I'm much happier that all of this happened in 2020 instead of like 1985. Because in 1985, we wouldn't have had all of this technology that worked in order to keep us engaged and connected in the ways that at least we were. And so as much as it is funny to make fun of 2020 and how terrible it was, I mean, at least it wasn't 1973 or 1992 that this happened, right? Much better now than then. And God has helped us use those technological capacities we have in order to connect with people in new ways, to help discipleship, help disciple, help grow, help think about the things of God, help wrestle with the issues of faith in our world today. Number 6 is that in July we hosted a food truck night, which was great. I don't know if you remember all the way back to July. That happened like 19 years ago. But in July, it was hot and things were a little bit more open than they were now. Our numbers were down in the state and the county. And so we hosted 4 food trucks on our property: Greek on the street, T&J Waffles, Pasta La Vista Baby. It's a great name. And Miss Twist. And those food trucks were just on our property, and we had people from the community coming out and having dinner and getting to know people from our congregation. And it was just a great way for, even though the interior doors weren't open, it was like our doors were wide open to our neighbors, and having people on our property and see how we want to be a good neighbor to the people who live around us. It was a really, really great night. Number 7, we made a strategic choice to begin sermon-based small groups. And Jake made mention of this in his announcements earlier, but we read together a book called Sticky Church by Larry Osborne. Larry Osborne is a pastor in San Diego of a large church, and he talks about their strategy to help people connect in a busy world, in a world where it's difficult to find time for things, was to not give out more curriculum to them, but to give people in their church a chance to meet in a small group where they re-engage the sermon, so that the sermon isn't just 30 minutes and then you move on with your life, but you have to sit with a little bit and then come back to your small group and talk about it again, and not just hear the pastor's opinion, but now hear your friends' opinions as well, and wrestle with strategized curriculum around the sermon that was given. And so they found in their church that this made for a sticky church. People stuck to their church because they were thinking about the sermon more, and it was a low level of commitment with a high amount of payoff for the people in their church. They didn't have to read more books in order to be prepared. They had to go to church, which they were already doing, and it was an easy gateway then to join a small group. And so we've had some really exciting starts to that. Now, not all of our small groups are sermon-based small groups. I don't think we're going to head in that direction, but we're going to keep increasing that volume because I really appreciate the idea of how sticky that can be, that there's 2 times to engage with the content of the church during the week, and it makes it easier to start connecting with people that maybe you wouldn't meet otherwise in a small group, and get used to connecting with them as well. And so that's been a strategic choice we made this year. That's been really exciting. Number 8 is that our teens have been meeting, and Pastor Jesse tells me, this is the part that excites me, the attendances have been great, but he tells me that the teens have found a new initiative of inviting that's gotten stronger and stronger. That because of social distancing and closed down schools, teens have a social need that is just through the roof right now. And he tells me that teens are inviting people, that every week he meets new people he never met before that come as a result of teenagers inviting their friends to be here. Now, if you've not seen how the teens meet, it doesn't look like it looks here. We're trying to make family pods that are social distanced, right? We don't do any pods with teens. We line up every 6 feet measured meticulously, 1 chair, then another row behind, seats 6 feet apart, and it looks like a big giant grid in here. And frankly, it looks like a scary sci-fi movie if you're just watching from up above. But 2020, am I right? But the teens are socially distanced from one another, but it gives them an opportunity to get together. And I know my daughter, who's a teen, is just every week counting down the minutes to be here on Wednesday. And then watching how teens are owning their evangelistic task of reaching out to friends in a time where that's the need that they need scratched, is social interaction, and utilizing that as a method in which to bring their friends to church. The teens are leading the way for us in our church in 2020, reminding us of the power of invitation and the effectiveness of invitation. The teens are leading the way, and I hope as you hear this story that it moves you to an evangelistic verb as well, to match the intensity of our teenagers, the effectiveness of our teenagers, and inviting friends in a time where social interaction is so desperately needed. Number 9, we hosted a women's conference. I got to remember how many rocks I have. He's so excited, right? 9, 10, 11. I think I bring 2 now. Yeah. we hosted a women's conference this year, and there's some great story behind doing a conference. We'd done a retreat every single year before. And this year, Lorene Huffman, who's in charge of our women's ministry, felt this urge that long before quarantine and masks and coronavirus, that they should switch to an on-again, off-again retreat, conference. And it ended up working out perfectly this year that there was going to be no retreating in 2020. And so having planned for a conference was perfect for this year. God was way out in front on that. And the event ended up being catalytic for so many women, having speakers and worship and time together. Again, socially distanced, masked, very careful. But the Spirit of the Lord poured out upon the ladies who met together, whether online or in person. God showed up even in a year of quarantine as they gathered together and worshiped and prayed for each other and spent time with each other. It was a huge, huge moment for so many women who came back and were telling me stories of God breaking through in amazing ways in their lives. It was just really exciting to see the way in which that happened at work this year. Number 10, we began a ritual with doors at the beginning of this year. I don't know if you remember this, but we had a green door and a white door. And on one door, we would place our prayer requests. And then when they were answered, we would take the Post-it and move it from the white door to the green door. And we were seeing that people had incredible needs, and people would come into church early and would pray for the prayer requests. And then we would celebrate as they were moved, and we would see how the prayer request door started really full, but after a very short time, the answered door, we were seeing people move prayer requests over to the answered door. And it was such a tangible and exciting reminder of the way in which God answers our prayers. And it was received by so many. In fact, I still hear that that's one of the things that people miss a lot about Crossroads coming week to week is gathering around and praying at the doors and seeing what it was that God was doing in people's lives and having tangible ways to pray for one another. The doors will return, but we started that 22 years ago in January, whatever it was. And it was just such an exciting way to see people tangibly involved in praying for one another, and then also a tangible reminder of the fact that God answers our prayers. Number 11 is a bit of a subtle one, but I want to let you in on it because I think it's exciting. We have made the transition from CCB, Church Community Builder, if you've heard us talk about that. It's a church database, to one streamlined, so we use like 6 or 7 programs in order to pull off church at Crossroads. We're moving to what's called Shelby Next, and we've been working really hard in 2020 in order to get ourselves ready to make this transition. But Shelby Next is one program that streamlines all this stuff. Now, on a day-to-day basis, this isn't going to make a ton of difference to you, but there are a couple things I want to tell you about as I sort of preview our unveiling of this year. For example, if you have children, you may have been caught in the check-in line before. That check-in line can be annoying. Sometimes you're in check-in line trying to get your kids checked in. There's some family in front of you that they can't find their name, and you hear the second song playing, and you're like, am I ever going to get to church? Well, now there's an app for that. I just think this is the coolest thing. I talk about this all the time. I think the staff is tired of hearing it from me. But on your way into church, one parent can be driving in, and the other parent can load up their app and check their children in virtually before they get here. How cool is that? It also has the ability for us to do things like not just simply email. Now, a lot of people don't check their email like they used to. People under 30 don't seem to be interested in even having an email address, right? And so this program will allow us to send text messages to people, many people in our congregation, and not just one at a time, as a way to increase communication. There's so many other things about integrated programs, financial accountability, streamlining of information, databasing like we're already doing. And so hopefully it creates a more organized church in ways that you might be able to feel or see. There will be things on the app, and there will be text, different things that you feel. For the most part, though, it's just an effort for us to try to streamline the work of the church in order to create a more organized, communicative church for you. And then number 12, the last thing that I'm really excited about is that we have done some incredible work this year at eliminating or working towards eliminating our debt. Now, this building that we're in right now was built about the year 2003, 4, that neighborhood. So it's getting to be about 15 to 20 years old, this building. And so when this was purchased or built, we took out a mortgage or loan for about $2 million. When I got here 2.5 years ago, we had just cleared the $1 million mark in order to pay it off. And so I had inherited this story that was told here, that they had started a fund called 2020, which was to eliminate the debt. And by the time I got here in 2018, we'd kind of fallen behind that because there'd been pastoral transition, all sorts of really, really good reasons. But I loved the idea of eliminating the debt. And so when I got here, it was in the mid 900,000s, pushing $1 million. Well, going into 2021, I'm happy to tell you that just in the last 2.5 years, we're down to $460,000 left. And so that's about $500,000 in 2.5 years that we have paid down, which is just incredibly exciting. And we have a strategy that I hope we can keep with, that we're trying to stay around the neighborhood of getting it paid off by the year 2022. And that's just 2 years away to finish off the debt, at which point we would be completely debt-free as a church. And my hope and my prayer is at that point that we can use the roughly $250,000 a year that we're paying in mortgage in order to leverage that in starting new ministries around the church, rather than paying off debt. And so I'm really looking forward to and hoping that we can get there. And so we still have that fund in place, 2020. And if you have paid your tithes and you're wondering, how else can I serve the church or help the church? You can mark a check for 2020 and help us pay down that debt. There have been folks who have helped us out by donating stock, and there's tax benefit to doing that. We're able to receive that and put that right towards paying down our debt. And our goal is, our hope is, feel a sense of divine call even, is to try to get it paid off as soon as possible so that we can start new ministries out of the church rather than just paying off debt. And so that's a pretty exciting thing, I think. There's so much more, too. I mean, we can go on and on and on and on about the things that God has done through our church this year. We helped about 30 families with Christmas presents and dinner for Christmas this year. We partnered with a county school, giving them backpacks and food for people in need. We gave out Thanksgiving food in Baltimore City to needy families. We figured out how to use our technology to help ministries like Moms Next, Sunday school classes, and ISI. And we're finding that people who moved out of Maryland years ago are reconnecting with their friends, utilizing the technology we have in small groups. We revamped our website this year. We placed a Be More Caring receptacle in our back, becoming the first place in Howard County to open up a donation center for clothes for that ministry. There's so much that Crossroads has done and been involved in, and God has been working through us in mighty and incredible ways this year. It's been a difficult year for so many, but if there's anything that I've learned this year, it's this, is that being the church is not just about Sunday. Being Christian is not just about Sunday. The Christian life, the work of the church, is so much larger than that. So much larger than that. We are called in so many ways beyond just showing up on Sunday and having a good time when we're together, to be the very presence of Christ for the sake of the world. And at Crossroads, we're leveraging that in as many ways as we possibly can. And so I invite you to make that personal this year in 2021. That being a Christian is not just about Sundays. If you want to leverage that in this year, you can practice new ways of generosity. You can practice new manners of evangelism, starting just by getting to know your neighbor who lives on your street. You can build new devotional practices with the extra time and the different schedule that you have. You can learn to lead family worship so that you're teaching your kids to be a worshiping person, part of your family. There's so many ways that we can be the body of Christ for the sake of the world, even in a time where church on Sunday morning looks weird, feels different, and it's kind of frustrating. But this Christian life, the work of the church, is about all of us giving all of ourselves to God, being fully present to God in so many more ways than just being a church attendee. And God has given us the opportunity to partner with him in so many ways in 2020. And I look forward to seeing what God does through us in 2021 as well. Would you join me in standing as we sing a final song?